Good morning. Welcome and welcome to this virtual and in-person service of the Idaho Falls Unitarian Universalist Church on this 25th day of February, although it feels like April, 2024. We know you come here for different reasons: to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of your bigger questions. We know you come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. If you are watching online, please sign into the chat box so that we may know who's attending, and it will enable you to send in your joys and concerns. I am Ron Goen, and I will be assisting Arthur Kull in the service this morning. The tech person is Vic Allen, and Jessica Coopers will be our virtual music, and time for all ages will be Cindy Logan. Announcements. Please write your joys and concerns on a slip of paper back in the back, and folks online can put them in the chat box. Please silence your cell phones if you have not already done so. Are there any other announcements?
We will have a women's group on Friday, March 1st, this coming Friday at 5:30, and we'll be having it at Rhonda White's house. And I'll send out an email with the address on Tuesday, so if you're not getting the emails, you can see me after the service, and I'll make sure you're on the list.
Right. Since March 1st happens to be on Friday, women's group will be this coming Friday. Are there any other announcements? If not, now let us prepare ourselves for worship. Calm our hearts, our minds, our breathing. Breathe deeply in and out, listening to your breath as I ring the peace bowl 3 times. Our church's covenant helps us remember why we are a part of this faith and why we give our time and our resources to this congregation. If you so choose, please recite along with me the covenant that this congregation has chosen to live by. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We will now light the chalice. As we ignite this flame, may it represent the warmth of love, the clarity of wisdom, and the transformative power of community. Let it guide us on our journey of shared exploration and understanding.
Good morning. Today's call to worship is from the Sage's Tao Te Ching by William Martin. The time is coming when all the scattered parts of life will blend in a harmonious whole. The high points and the triumphs, the sins and the failures, the bravery and the cowardliness, the youthful aspirations and the adult regrets will become strands in one single weaving that will reveal itself as made of love. You do not have to brace yourself against your fears of future shocks. Such bracing stiffens your joints and stirs your thoughts. You can welcome the future as you welcome a lover, with openness, trust, and joy. Please rise and join in singing hymn number 1008 in the Teal hymnal.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, when we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell the story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, when we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of secret space, and the God of our heart stirs within, when we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Good morning. Today's story is You're Not My Best Friend Anymore. It's Charlotte Pomerantz and pictures by David Soman. There's a little boy and a little girl. This is Molly and Ben. They lived in a two-family house. Molly lived with her mother on the ground floor. Ben lived with his father and his aunt one flight up. They all shared a front stoop and a backyard. Molly and Ben walked to school together. They ate at the same table in the lunchroom. After school, they played and did their homework together. Sometimes they even wore the same t-shirts. They even celebrated their birthdays together. Ben was born on June 5th. Molly was born on June 15th. So they had a double birthday party on June 10th. Molly's parents liked the idea. Ben's father said it was easier to bake 2 cakes at one time. Ben's aunt said she liked big parties. On Saturdays, Molly and Ben often went downtown to spend their allowances. They didn't go every Saturday. Sometimes they would save for weeks and weeks and buy one big thing that they both wanted. Right now, they were saving for a tent. There they are looking at the sporting goods store, wishing. One day, a week before the double birthday party, Molly and Ben had a fight. Not a little fight about which program to watch on TV, or who should put the books and toys away, or whose front teeth stuck out the most. It was a big fight. It was about the kind of tent they should buy with all the allowance they had saved. Molly wanted a pup tent. Ben wanted an umbrella tent. Kind of side with Ben, but you know. You can't stand up in a pup tent, said Ben. Who wants to stand up, said Molly. A tent is for sleeping. Well, I like to stand up, said Ben. An umbrella tent is dumb, said Molly. A pup tent is dumb, said Ben. You're dumb, said Molly. I'm going home. Good, said Ben. Don't call me up unless it's an emergency. Emergency, snorted Molly. What sort of emergency would make me call you? Ben shrugged. I don't know. Maybe if the house caught fire? That's the dumbest thing I ever heard, said Molly. We live in the same house. So don't call, screamed Ben, even if the house is on fire. And he slammed the door. Molly opened it. By the way, she shouted, you're not my best friend anymore. There she is, very righteous there. Okay, the rest of the week, they walked to school on different sides of the street. They sat at different tables in the lunchroom. They didn't wear the same t-shirts, and they didn't do their homework or play together after school. They're just sort of sulking by themselves. Molly wrote in her diary, Dear Diary, I told my mom that I wanted to go camping by myself. My mom said, no way. I hate Ben. I wish he would move to Juneau, which is the capital of Alaska. Ben wrote in his diary, My dad says that I can camp out in the backyard with a friend. Who needs friends? I hate Molly. I wish I had a puppy. Molly and Ben didn't speak to each other for 4 days. Then Ben saw Molly sitting on the front stoop. He shifted from one foot to the other. By the way, he said, my father wants to know when you are having your birthday party. Molly looked suspicious. Your father? She said. How come your father wants to know? Because, said Ben, he bakes the cakes, remember? Molly sighed. I guess we should have one party for the sake of the grown-ups. After all, they buy all the birthday stuff. Good excuse. The afternoon of the double party was warm and sunny, so they held it in the backyard. All of their friends in the neighborhood came. No one noticed that Molly and Ben didn't talk to each other. Everyone played until it was time to go home. Molly and Ben were alone in the backyard. Ben went into the house. When he came back, he was carrying a large package. I know we are not friends, he said, but I bought you a present anyway. Thanks, said Molly. I bought you one too. She reached under the table and handed him a long box. Pretty good-sized boxes. Molly opened her present first. It was a sleeping bag with a patch of Raggedy Andy on the front. Ben opened his present. It was a sleeping bag with a patch of a puppy. Wow, said Molly, you spent your whole allowance on me? Ben grinned. So did you, he said. They went into the house and asked their parents if they could sleep in the backyard. Molly's mother said yes. Ben's father listened to the weather report to make sure it wasn't going to rain. Ben's aunt made them promise to brush their teeth. For the first time in their whole lives, they couldn't wait to go to bed. They picked a nice spot in the backyard under a linden tree and snuggled into their sleeping bags. It fits perfectly, Ben said. So does mine, said Molly. I really like the patch of the puppy, said Ben. Raggedy Andy happens to be my favorite doll, said Molly. It was very quiet, so quiet you could hear a tea kettle whistling next door. Molly said, "Ben, are you awake?" "No," said Ben. "I'm talking in my sleep." "Me too," said Molly. "It's a good thing we're both asleep," said Ben, "because I wanted to say that I'm willing to have a pup tent." "That's funny," said Molly. "I was just thinking that an umbrella tent is okay with me." "Let's talk about it tomorrow," said Ben, "when we are both awake." Giggling softly, they fell asleep.
We will now. Are there, oh, we will now. Do we have children to sing out? No, I think not. So we will bypass that part. Now we'll read joys and concerns. And Arthur will light a candle for each of these as I read them off. And I will now talk into the microphone. From Molly, a joy and a concern. I think this is glad to be home. And concern for all people who have been affected by the California storms. They have really been inundated with rain. From Victoria, a joy. Karen Schaefer's eye surgery was successful. Layla has been staying with her. Karen is pleased with the results, so that's wonderful. And from Kat Reese, a joy. Got to see my son, Gavin, and his family. It was great to see them. Spoiled my daughter and friend over the weekend too. And from Victoria, a joy. Change for Change brought $162 2 weeks ago for the Idaho Falls No Kill Shelter, a great contribution. And another from Victoria, Joy, had lunch with Karen Croft, who talked about her healing with red light therapy. I bought a bed bath honey. Honey, and are relieved of muscle aches. It feels like a miracle. Wonderful. And are there any joys or concerns in the chat box? One more candle we will light for all those joys and concerns we hold in our hearts.
The reading today is from the introduction to the book The Road to Character by David Brooks. David Brooks writes, "Recently I've been thinking about the differences between the resume virtues and the eulogy virtues. The resume virtues are the ones you list on your resume, the skills that you bring to the job market and that contribute to external success. The eulogy virtues are the virtues that get talked about at your funeral, the ones that exist at the core of your being, whether you're kind, brave, honest, or faithful, what kind of relationships you formed." He continues, "One book that helped me think about these two sets of virtues is Lonely Man of Faith by Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. Soloveitchik noted that there are two accounts of creation in Genesis. and argued that these represent the two opposite sides of our nature, which he called Adam 1 and Adam 2. In today's lingo, we could say that Adam 1 is a career-oriented, ambitious side of our nature. Adam 1 wants to build, create, and discover things. He wants to have high status and win victories. Adam 2 is the internal Adam. Adam 2 wants to embody certain moral qualities. He wants to have a serene inner character. He wants to love intimately, to sacrifice self in service of others, to live in obedience to some transcendent truth, to have a cohesive inner soul that honors creation and one's own possibilities. An offering to support the work of the Church will now be given and received. Most Wednesdays, I go to the Idaho Falls Rotary Club's lunch. After settling down with our lunches, we stand, we sing a song, we recite the Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way tests of Rotary, which is as follows. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it a truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Its purpose is not so different from our UU principle, which states, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. They are not so different in their virtues, values. In thinking about what message to convey in today's sermon, I was in the middle of being depressed by the current raw and divisive political climate in our country and the insane statements made by some of our politicians. So talking about virtues in this climate seemed kind of quaint and maybe passé too. But in going through some of my former sermons and newspaper columns, I was reminded about the importance of a message about living a life espousing the basic tenets of morality and virtues. At the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly 2010 in Minneapolis, the Reverend Dr. Galen Gingrich, senior minister at All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in New York City, a theologian and religious philosopher, had taken on the task of giving new life and meaning to our religious institution. Most of the following is from his presentation at the General Assembly. His observations are as true today as they were in 2010. He said, "Everywhere you look, religious fundamentalism is burgeoning. It is an emergent cancer that will bring increasingly severe political, economic, and religious disruption to our nation and our world. The only forces rising up in serious protest are the fundamentalists of the left, such as Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins. Their principal strategy is to argue correctly, but inadequately, that the religious fundamentalists are wrong about the nature of God, the meaning of revelation, and the purpose of history. While Unitarian Universalism stagnates and fundamentalism flourishes, a third trend has emerged. Spiritual hunger has deepened in our nation. People are more connected than ever through social media, but also more lonely. They accomplish more with less satisfaction. They live more rapidly, but fewer experiences endure. They feel divided within themselves and isolated from other people. They often feel lost and alone. They long for a place where they can restore their sense of wholeness and regain a sense of purpose. Unitarian Universalist congregation can be such places. Our purpose as a religious community is to awaken our sense of the sacred and renew our resolve to transform ourselves and the world. People who come to our congregations are looking for a religious community that is clear and definitive about the importance of personal spiritual discipline. In the past, Unitarian Universalists have, how shall we say, been quite lax in these areas, preaching the gospel of personal freedom and moral flexibility. Focusing on virtues offers us one way to address this need and provides a vocabulary for doing so. The English word virtue derives from the ancient Latin word vir, V-I-R, which means man. In Latin, vir means manliness or valor, especially on the battlefield. For the ancient Greeks, however, the idea of virtue applied not only to battle, but to every aspect of life. To be virtuous is to be most fully whatever you most essentially are. As we will see, virtue ultimately has less to do with gender or race identity than it does with our common humanity. Virtue is the discipline whereby we become fully human. Christopher Peterson and Martin Seligman are two psychologists who collaborated to create a classification system for virtues based on the system that exists for mental and physical illnesses called the DSM-5. Rather than focusing on shortcomings and flaws, however, Peterson and Seligman focus on what is right about people, and specifically the strength of character that makes the good life possible. They insist that character strength, or virtue is the bedrock of the human condition. In religious terms, the process of cultivating virtue leads to salvation not by grace or by faith, but salvation by character. This approach to ethics has been described by the philosopher Richard Taylor as the ethics of aspiration, which emphasizes the kind of people we aspire to become, as opposed to the ethics of duty, which emphasizes the following of rules that have been laid down by somebody else. The great moral issue of our time is the dearth of virtue. We need moral heroes today. We need virtuous men and women who rise up and instill strength of character in those who follow their lead, and heap shame on those who don't. Virtue is about the content of our character. It's about the kind of people we aspire to become and the kind of world we aspire to inhabit. Whenever we confront human wickedness, whether in our own hearts or in the world around us, we ask about standards of human conduct. What standards should we set for ourselves? Where should those standards come from? Over the course of human history, several answers have emerged to the question of what we should do. One answer is that we ought to do what we are required to do. In other words, we should look up to the heavens. People believed that God or the gods who created the earth and his people had also given us rules to live by, commandments to obey. God set the standard, and it is our duty to obey. Over time, however, some people began to realize that these rules are neither infallible nor, in the strict sense, divine. Rather, they are occasionally inspired human words cloaked in divine garb. As the divine commandments began to fade as a standard of conduct, a second answer began to emerge. We ought to do what achieves the best outcome. In the late 18th century, German philosopher Immanuel Kant proposed a standard known as the categorical imperative. For everyone who belongs in the category of rational people, Kant says, it is imperative that they should act only on principles they believe should become universal law. In other words, if asked what would happen if everyone acted as you are proposing to act, then if the overall outcome would be good, any action is morally commendable. If not, it's not. A century later, in England, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill developed a similar standard that became known as utilitarianism, based on the view that an action is right if it promotes happiness, and wrong if it promotes the reverse of happiness. They articulated the rule of utility. The good is whatever brings the greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. While standards based on outcome have much to commend, they seem unwieldy and unsatisfying. It is always hard to calculate the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And there are many things in life that are fine if a few people do them, but a disaster if everybody else does. Sometimes the needs of the few must take precedence over the needs of the many. Some actions are right even if they can't be universally practiced. The third answer is that in any given situation, we ought to do whatever an ethical person would do in that situation. In other words, We look within the heart and mind of an ethical person. This approach, while more relevant to the modern world than the other two, also happens to be the most ancient. In his major treatise on ethics, Aristotle states that both things and people can be judged successful in life if they achieve their ultimate purpose, which is to realize their full potential. Aristotle's way of thinking has to do with what is distinctive or unique about something. A knife, for example, has the distinctive ability to cut things. Therefore, a sharp knife, well used, has achieved its full potential. The distinctive capacity of human beings, Aristotle observes, is the capacity to reason. Our purpose as humans, therefore, should be to develop our rational powers and live in according with them. If this happens, we will achieve the state of being that Aristotle calls happiness or blessedness. Happiness is a result of living as human beings ought to live. The key to happiness, Aristotle insists, is virtue. It lies along what the Greeks called the golden mean between two extremes. Confidence, for example, lies midway between recklessness and cowardice. Truthfulness lies between boastfulness and false modesty. In a culture that champions the individual at every turn, an ethic based on virtue seems exactly right. Capitalism, democracy, and Protestantism emerged as the individual became the point of fulcrum in the realm of economics, politics, and religion. Virtue emerges as an ideal when the individual becomes the point of fulcrum in the ethical realm. The problem, however, is that virtue has fallen out of favor over the centuries since Aristotle, as the Christian tradition developed. It slowly lost its confidence in the human ability to do good. In the 4th century, one of Christianity's most influential leaders mapped out a radically different approach. Instead of continuing to emphasize the emphasis on freedom of the will, St. Augustine insisted that humanity had been irreparably damaged by the fall from original perfection, when Adam and Eve disobeyed God in the Garden of Eden. Because of that original sin, Augustine believed humanity had been rendered sick, miserable, and hopelessly enslaved to sin. The reason why Augustine declared that humanity had lost its capacity to govern its actions was because, as a teenage boy, he was unable to exercise rational control over his own sexual impulses. So over time, Augustine took this fact about his teenage life and came to believe theologically that spontaneous sexual desire was proof that original sin had implicated the entire human race. Well, who knew? It's always about sex, right? He insisted that humanity was ravaged by sin and was in need of outside intervention. In other words, after Augustine, virtue was impossible. Well, Augustine was wrong about a lot of things, including this. It's time, in Galen Güngish's view, to remove the avoidance of sin from the center of our moral discourse and focus once again on moral excellence. It's time for a renaissance of virtue. In a culture that champions the individual, virtue is an approach to ethics that individuals can believe in. And it gives us, as Unitarian Universalists, a way to respond religiously in a world where so many people act so horribly. Just as the language of human rights has become a vital political tool in our efforts to extend the domain of civilization and the rule of law, the language of virtue can become a vital religious tool in our efforts to extend the domain of morality and the rule of character. I believe it is a vital means of growing Unitarian Universalism by adapting it to our increasingly diverse culture. Unitarian Universalism has often been described as a tradition that believes in salvation by character rather than by race or faith, as I stated before. In other words, we believe in virtue, the personal spiritual discipline of becoming the kind of individuals we ought to become in order to live as human beings ought to live. Reverend Gunger's catalogue of virtues, taken from 2.5 millennia of many scholars' thinking about this, includes 7 necessary virtues: wisdom, courage, compassion, justice, temperance, transcendence, and hope. Wisdom. Wisdom is a combination of 2 things: curiosity and discernment. Curiosity is a personal spiritual discipline that expands the range of our knowledge and the depth of our experience. The more we know about our lives and our world, the better our decisions about how to live will be. If we keep our wits about us, we will develop the kind of deep insight and accrue the kind of broad experience that accounts for wisdom. Then we need to decide which of the paths before us leads to virtue. We will have, as Reinhold Niebuhr once put it, the wisdom to know the difference. Courage. The inner experience of courage, the courage to be, leads to an outward expression of courage, the courage to do. Courage is the ability to see evil close at hand and take steps to confront it despite present danger. It is also the ability to see good afar and take a step toward it despite obvious risks. Courage is to know a calling that is greater than fear. Compassion is the outward expression of an inner awareness, an awareness of our own vulnerability. People who lack compassion fully believe that they are invincible, that they will never need anyone's help. For this reason, compassion is a leading indicator of moral strength. Compassion also recognizes that other people are dependent and needy as well, and that I'm one of the people on whom they depend. Justice is a process, a procedure we follow in our political life to ensure that all of us are maximally free to pursue whatever goals we choose in life. Justice is also a purpose, a set of goals we pursue in our religious life to ensure that all of us fulfill our potential. Temperance. Aristotle defined virtue as the golden mean between 2 vices, one an excess, the other an absence. The golden mean between self-indulgence and self-denial is temperance, which does not mean abstinence, but moderation. transcendence. This is not about God's separation from the natural world, but rather our experience of being related to it. The feeling of being deeply connected to everything. Transcendence enables us to go beyond the limited confines of our daily lives and see the reality of our world and our place in it. The hallmark of transcendence is humility, the recognition of our utter dependence on the world around us, and gratitude, the recognition of our obligation in return. Hope. Virtue calls us to be light-hearted about present troubles and optimistic about future possibilities. In religious terms, hope derives from faith, a leap of the moral imagination that connects the world as it is to the world as it might become. To escape the clutches of the present, we need a sense of humor. To imagine the contours of the future, we need faith. To work our way from the present toward the future, we need optimism. Hope springs from humor about the present, faith in the future, and optimism, the power to do the work. In conclusion, virtue is the personal spiritual discipline of becoming the kind of individuals we ought to become, so that we might live as human beings ought to live. It is the discipline of moral excellence. Amen. I invite you now to rise and join in singing hymn number 121, Let's Build a Land.
We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build
Our closing words are from The Road to Character by David Brooks. You have to give to receive. You must surrender to something outside yourself to gain strength within yourself. You must conquer your desire to get what you crave. Success leads to the greatest failure, which is pride. Failure leads to the greatest success, which is humility and learning. In order to fulfill yourself, you have to forget yourself. In order to find yourself, you have to lose yourself.
We will now extinguish the chalice. Please join with me in reading the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.